This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as he is every episode, they call him Mr. Action. It's Robb Reinhold.
Ooh, I like that, Mr. Action. And yes, I would love to be Mr. Action all the time as an extrovert. This episode is going to be right up my alley here.
Yeah, and this is going to be, I guess, the anti-episode to something we did, a few months ago, I think. It was the episode we did on boredom. So, like anything, nothing is definitive. There's always little nuances here and there. So we are going to tackle the aggressive side of the equation. And, we've done this too before, Rob, but I think when we come up with these new ideas, they're just really expansions on some of the older ideas. But we've gotten a lot of really good feedback on the boredom episode, which I was a bit surprised, and the extrovert episode. So I think it's time we expand on this a bit.
Getting really exciting feedback on an episode about boredom is very surprising.
Yeah, I think certain episodes just hit people a certain way. Maybe they didn't know how to articulate it before. Maybe they don't even realize that they had these issues and they just needed somebody to actually say it. On this podcast, Rob, not a whole lot of people talk about trading psychology out there. And if they do, it's in one video and they try to encompass everything into a 45-minute video, and it just doesn't do the job. I really think it helps to break these issues down into situations like we do here.
There's no question, because when you break them down into smaller pieces, they become more relevant. And people say, oh my gosh, that's how I was feeling. But when you just cover the big broad topics, everyone says, yeah, I know I understand it, but maybe that's not an issue for me. But when we get down into these granular things and we literally say, oh, I did this once, so many people are like, oh my gosh, that's what I was doing the whole time and I never really saw it. So I'm really glad that we are just going into greater detail to get to every single possible situation that can happen.
Yeah, I would agree. And for action bias, the way we're going to open the show here is by, we always try to define terms. And so, Rob, this is an outline you put together. So I'm going to have you go ahead and define terms here. Then we'll throw out a few examples of action bias that you might experience other people doing in real life. And then we'll kind of switch it back over to how it's relevant to trading. So, Rob, go ahead and start us off here. If you say the word action bias, not everybody really knows what you're referring to. What exactly are you referring to here?
That's a great place to start. So there's a lot of study out there on action bias. If you type it into Google or wherever you go for search engine, type in action bias, you'll see that this phenomenon has been studied by social scientists, and they've really dived into why this is a thing. And basically, when we talk about action bias, it's when you have a situation that the decision is not clear of what to do. A lot of us tend to act first instead of sit back and really think about it. And let's talk about why we do that as human beings. Because we're really thinking about the after effects. When I was raising my kids, I'm going to spend a lot of time on this episode talking about raising my kids because I really want to show the programming that goes into all of us. But, I always told my kids, look, you're never choosing what you're choosing at the moment. You're always choosing the consequence down the road. So I'd say something like, and again, the kids were like 5, 6 years old. I said, hey, if there's like 10 donuts on the table and you decide to eat all of them, you're not really deciding to eat those donuts. What you're deciding is you're going to feel sick, 12 hours later. And if you keep doing it, you're going to get overweight and your bones and muscles are going to hurt and all that stuff. So I really wanted to teach my kids, you're choosing the consequence. Now, we all understand that. We all understand that as human beings for the most part. And so when we get into the action bias, we start to think about the consequences of not acting. I'm going to use an analogy I read online. Look, I actually fact-checked this right before the episode, and it is not factually true. So, again, I'm fully understanding this, but I want to give this example to really give you an idea of action bias. Let's talk about taking a penalty kick in soccer. All right. Let's say you are the goalie. You are the goalie. And let's say that you know that this one kicker typically kicks it down the center. So you decide that you're not going to move at all. Now, as you're sitting on that line, I want you to pitch yourself, you're the goalie, you're on the line, and you know, okay, this kicker, I think the best odds are I stay right here in the center and I don't move at all. There's 50,000 people in the stands. Your family's there. You're going to go out for some drinks and fun afterwards. If you are the hero, if you can stop this goal, the guy starts to come towards the ball, starts to kick it. What are you thinking? I know what I would be thinking. I would be thinking, if this guy kicks it to the left or right and I don't move at all, I'm going to be humiliated. So all of a sudden my brain's going to do this thing that says, hey, I want to avoid this humiliation. I need to choose left or right to jump. And so just for that reason, I take action. Because look, we've all seen penalty kicks. They're very difficult to stop. If you dive left and the player shoots it to the right, there's really no shame in that. But if you just sat there and did nothing, the shame would just be overwhelming. So because of that feeling, you would want to dive left or right. Now, here is the actual numbers of this. So there is no statistical benefit for a goalie to stand still, but there is a statistical edge if you are the penalty kicker to just kick it right down the middle. For this exact reason, because the goalie is most likely going to dive left or right because they don't want to just sit there. But only 14% of kicks are down the center, and most of those end up going in. But think about the kicker. Think about if you were the kicker, you've got 50,000 people screaming, the game is on the line. If you just kick it right down the center and the goalie doesn't move and just catches it, you will be a laughingstock. So you decide, you know what, I know my statistics are best to shooting it down the middle, but I've got to at least aim left or right. This is action bias in a nutshell. And you can see on both sides of this situation, we have two people in opposite situations and they both feel the need to take action because they know that the embarrassment or the pain of not taking action is greater. Patrick, what do you think about that?
If I was the goalie, I would just show the shooter my ass and my balls and hope he just was laughing too hard to shoot an accurate shot. But yeah, I know what you're saying, though. It's so this goes into a couple different categories that we're talking about today. Mine are going to be different, but I'll tell you how. Like in your situation, yours was more, what is this going to do to my reputation? How is this going to make me look in front of other people? Now, when you're trading, this can or cannot be a factor. If you're just trading for yourself and nobody's looking, well, then it doesn't matter. But maybe you're trading for a prop firm and you're worried about what they're going to think if you just sit there and do nothing for a month. Or maybe you have a signal service and people are paying you to give them trades. And you take some days off because there's no trades to be had. But they're like, what the hell? Why aren't you giving me any trades? So there's pressure there, really, no matter what you're doing. So I think that's a really great example. One of the actions I want to give is a Vegas example because that's what I knew for so long. And I've brought this up before, but this is just somebody who always feels like they need to be doing something. And I don't know if we covered this in the extrovert episode or not, but in Vegas we call them action junkies. So if you're sitting at a Texas Hold'em table and you have that guy there that just wants to play every single hand, because if not, then maybe they don't feel stimulated, maybe they don't feel like their time is justified. And then in the sports book, you have those people to where okay, let's say Monday Night Football, great example. People ask me, hey, you got to play for Monday Night Football. What are you doing? I'm like, I have no advantage there. I'm not playing the game. And they're like, what? Why? It's Monday Night Football, bro. It's the only game on. Why do you not have a bet? And they can't process this. They can't understand this. So there's just people who are just hardwired to always need to be taking action of some type. But is this the best move in the trading world? We're going to get further into that. But those are probably my best examples, I guess, from personal experience, Rob. Do you have any more examples before we move on to the kind of the why and the solution portions?
Yes, I actually have one more example that I think is just, it blew me away when I did this in my life. And then I have this conversation with any trader I have that's going from they had their job or their business and they're trading on the side. And they've done well enough on their trading that they want to either quit their job or work less. And they're always so excited. Rob, this has been a goal of mine for a long time. I wanted to be able to quit my job and trade full time. And I always reach out to them and say, hey, you don't want to do this. And every time they're like, what are you talking about? This has been my goal. And I said, look, let me tell you why you don't want to do this. You are used to going to a job and working and doing work. And with that work, you ended up getting a paycheck. I remember when I was shifting into becoming a trader, I really thought, oh, I've got to work. I need to work hard in order to make a lot of money as a trader. And I remember that I would be downstairs in my basement, or I'd drive all the way down to the Maverick office, and I'd come home. My wife would say, hey, did you make any trades? And I'd say, no, I didn't make any trades today. Now, I want you just to think about this. My wife, who is, a new mom, I'm leaving the house, not helping her at all, going downtown to the Maverick office and sitting there all day long and not making a trade whatsoever. And then coming home and be like, yeah, I didn't make a trade. Obviously, that kind of stuff puts some pressure on you to take action, because you think, I need to work hard, because everything else in our life, we work hard and we get the results. And a lot of times we equate that to physical work. Trading is one of the only professions where you make less the harder you work. And in one of our first episodes, we made a joke that we should get some t-shirts that say trade harder. That's not how trading works. So when we equate this action, taking action, to becoming successful at something and making money, we're really tying our hands to not sit on them and to actually go and do things.
Yeah, and I remember you giving those analogies in the past, and it's so right. I can imagine you and I as some young hotshot traders. We just got hired on to a trading room, and we're talking shit. I'm like, bro, I'm going to outwork you. I'm going to trade so much harder than you. And that really, you're right. This is the only profession I can think of where it just doesn't work that way. Now, you do need to put in the work to test your system and to constantly improve on your system. That's where the work really comes in. So it's not like you can just be super lazy and step up and do it. Well, you know what? Actually, your Flat Earth Trading kind of spoke to that. You could just be super lazy and still do fairly well, but you're never really going to be able to optimize things and get there quicker if you do it that way, of course. Work has to come from somewhere.
I just had this thought pop into my brain as you and I, young traders on the trading floor, and you being like, dude, I made 25 trades today. I'm like, oh yeah, I made 33 today. And then we're both trying to outdo each other for how many trades. That's just ridiculous. That's not how this business works.
Yeah, and then 2 years later, we're both out on the street and I'm playing harmonica and you're tap dancing for money. Yeah, I can see it now. All right, but enough fan fiction. Let's go forward here, because yeah, it's so hard to get. It's so hard for your average person to wrap their head around. I just think of all of the incorrect things I thought when I first started this business. I kept thinking, man, I'm really going to outwork everybody else. And it's funny, I kind of ended up doing that because I had to create a brand new system from scratch. But you're right, in the actual act of trading, being an action junkie works against you more than for you, because not every trade is a good one. And so what I think, the way I want to relate this to some people is I think what they will do, and maybe you can speak to this more, Rob, because you've seen it so much more than I have with your traders, but when things are slow, especially, and their system is not giving them trades, they will start to invent reasons to take trades anyway. Whether that is dropping down to a lower time frame, which I have recommended in the past, use it sparingly, cut your risk in half, but don't do it just for the sake of taking a trade because you feel like you need to. or you feel like if you don't take some kind of action, then you're not actually trading. Trading is all about the moves you make and also the moves you don't make. And there is a time and a place for each.
And it's during those times that we fall back to the programming we received as children. And I just remember, my dad always, talking about, oh, you got to take action, you got to do something. And, we hear all these quotes like, you only miss the shots that you don't take. So we have been programmed from children to take action. And looking back at my own kids, I raised them. I was very deliberate with how I raised my kids. And I will admit this, I was very deliberate with my programming. I was a different kind of dad when I was younger than most dads, is that there were certain things I wanted my kids to really get and understand. And so I was going to program them. I was deliberate on what I said, how I said it, when I said it. And one of the things that I tried to really get them to understand is to take action. And so our family has a motto called ready, fire, aim. People always say, wait, no, Rob, you got that wrong. No, I didn't. Ready, fire, aim. Take action, adjust your course after. Because the worst thing to do is sit there and do nothing. Also, we had a saying in my family, action beats inaction every single time. So I've been programming my kids to go out into the world just like we were all programmed as kids. When you get into trading, boy, it really is going to hurt you sometimes. So I just want to point that out, that you've been programmed for action, and it's not wrong. It's not wrong at all. And in fact, there's wonderful, wonderful stories in my life, in your life, in everyone's life of people that did take that chance and did take action. But we have to recognize when it's a negative in our trading.
Yeah, and would you say this is more of a societal thing depending on where you're from? Because I think you and I are two Americans talking to each other. So this makes a lot of sense. Taking action is so much better than taking inaction at the end of the day. But that's just how you and I were probably raised too, maybe even not by our parents, but just by society as a whole, where you're supposed to take chances and taking risks and chances are rewarded, even when they fail. Every time I go to Europe and talk to people, the majority of them just don't feel this way unless they've seen us do it and they want in on that lifestyle. But the overall vibe of a place like Europe, I hate to pick on Europe because, there's, like I said, there's a yin and a yang to this, but is to really take a lot less chances and just spend more of your time enjoying life as opposed to chasing greatness or chasing excellence, like we tend to do in North America.
I definitely don't want to speak for Europeans in general, but let me just give you, I'm sitting here with a big grin on my face because I was very deliberate with my two children. Very deliberate. I tried to program them. Both my kids don't love to take action. So look, maybe I screwed it up, but you know what? I am convinced, and this is where, we get into all of this trading psychology. I'm convinced that nature is greater than nurture. I think who you are as a person, and that is in your DNA, is actually stronger than the programming you received as a child. So when you take a look at, all around the world or inside of some families, yes, there's absolutely going to be some cultural stuff going on, some programming. But in the end, I don't really think it matters too much because I think nature is greater. We are who we are. It's in our DNA. That's it.
Interesting. Okay. So I would even say even your most passive trader has probably experienced this at some point. And I think more it comes down to the fear of what might happen if you don't take action. And this can fall into FOMO. This can fall into, it just feels weird to be inactive for this long, and it just doesn't seem right. What do you think is going through most people's head when they are experiencing these lulls and really wanting to take action, even though they know they probably shouldn't?
I think it is thinking about the consequences of inaction that is probably going to do the most damage. You mentioned one, FOMO. We have a whole episode on FOMO. Can you imagine if you didn't take action, you did exactly what you planned on doing, and then the market did something you didn't expect it to do and ran away from you? You would absolutely kick yourself. So when you're sitting there in this period of inaction, which you have determined that is the best thing for you to do, your mind is racing with all the things that may happen that's going to make your inaction look bad. And that's what's really going to get you to crack in this situation, is you're going to be playing through all of those possibilities while you sit there and be patient and wait.
Yeah, and who hasn't experienced this at some point in time? And I think we talked about this too. This might just be a greatest hits episode at the end of the day, Rob, because I'm thinking back to all the times we spoke about this, you and I. But where, let's say your system gave you the trade, and you got all green lights, but it was kind of like barely all green lights, and in your mind you're still kind of hesitant and scared, so you're like, okay, maybe I just shouldn't do it. And it turns out it was the most perfect signal of all time. And then after your first take profit, it gave you another 600 pips before your exit indicator even hinted at closing out. It was one of those like year-changing trades, and your system gave it to you. But you still sat on your hands. I know this is kind of the opposite of what we're talking about, but those memories, it's like I said, it's not the losers that stick in my head. It's the winners that I should have taken but didn't, which do. And so now, every time I see even a little something that looks good, I'm going to want to at least explore it, because now, okay, a loss is a loss, but a win could be a really, really big win. And, and that I want that life-changing experience because I missed out on it last time.
Well, that is definitely going to be a recency bias, because if that happens to you once, you're going to take that baggage into the next time you decide that inaction is the best thing to do. You're going to be carrying that baggage, and that's going to make it even more difficult to sit there and be patient. So yes, we go through all of these scenarios, and when our hands are inactive, and I'm just using hands as a reference to action, your brain is still very active. And so what happens is a lot of times the action is to release the pressure that the brain is feeling, because your brain has so much activity going on with all the what ifs of what can happen. Taking action is a relief valve to all of that anxiety that you've built up inside yourself. And that's really why people have this action bias. It's because they feel discomfort. They feel discomfort with the situation they're in. Taking action relieves that discomfort, even if it's the wrong decision, because doing nothing is sometimes more difficult than doing something.
Yeah, it's like when we become traders, like, okay, I am a trader now. Traders trade. Traders don't just sit there and do nothing, because that's how we're programmed before we enter the game. That's why your wife never understood that, because that's a very logical way to think about things. But, I want to reiterate this point, especially for newer traders. That is not what trading is. Trading is very different and very nuanced this way. So moving into the solutions part. Are you ready for solutions?
Yes, and before we jump into that, I just had this dumb analogy. Maybe it's a dumb analogy, maybe it's genius, we'll see. I just had this analogy of fishing. If you take a look as trading like fishing, you do your research of where the fish are. You throw in your bait or whatever it is you're fishing with, and you see what you get. And some days you get some bites. Some days you don't get any bites. Some days you get a couple of fish, and sometimes you just hit gold and everything's going your way and you get a whole bunch of fish. That's how trading is. And I don't know if that's the correct analogy for where we are in this podcast episode, but you really have to approach it is that, look, I'm going to do the fishing based on my rules. And if I get fish, I do. I get them. If I don't, I don't. That's the action you can take. You have no control over whether that fish bites that hook. You have none whatsoever.
Yeah, and I guess bringing it back to actual trading, you guys know, where I am in my career now, 15 years in. I'm kind of bored and just kind of over it at this point, but I still do it because it's profitable. For me, if there's nothing to do, I'm kind of happy because that's just less work for me to do, even though boo-hoo, it's a whopping 5-10 minutes. But then I can just kind of get on with the rest of my day. So, I mean, maybe that's kind of how I justify it. Maybe that's one way some of you older veteran traders can look at this. But in terms of solutions, I have really one way to kind of process this. And if it helps, it helps. But Rob, you have a lot more. Let me just go ahead and start with mine. I just want you to understand that, like we've been talking about before, trading is different than pretty much everything else. And understand, too, that even if you don't put down a single trade for a month, maybe two, and this is not going to happen often, but I have had it happen to me, you actually are trading. When you don't trade at all, you actually are still trading. It's all the same thing. Clicking a button and putting in trades and risking money is trading, and sitting back and doing nothing until your system tells you to, and being patient and understanding the process and embracing the long game is also trading. So even during moments of inaction, it actually is action taking. If that makes any sense. Not taking action is action. That's not some kung fu weird shit. That's just how trading is. So maybe if you can put that in your mind, maybe it'll ease your mind a little bit going forward and reduce that anxiety that comes with, showing up every day and not doing anything. And maybe going forward, it won't seem so frustrating. And you'll still be motivated to show up every day, even though you're not doing anything. Because let me tell you, that's really the only way to play this if you want to be in that very small 0.1% of people who actually get good at this and stay good at this for a while. That's the only way I can explain it to anybody. Rob, do you have better ways? You have a lot of options here. I see that.
Look, I love what you just said. And people ask me, what I do for a living, and there's, how many hours a day do you work? This is what I always say. I'm always working. I am literally always taking in data. I am always reading. I am always studying. I'm looking at politics. Yes, I like politics. It's something that I find interesting. But inside of that politics, I'm getting market data. I am sucking in data all the time. Everywhere I go, I'm looking, what stores are busy right now? Why am I looking at that? Because that might give me a little bit of an edge on some stock trading I want to do. So look, I am always trading. Always. And I want to go back to this fishing analogy because it's actually going to turn out to be a pretty good analogy. Just think about somebody who is a fisherman, and that is their livelihood. And they need to catch fish or they starve. Now, yes, they could sit out all day long at the lake or at the river, whatever, fishing, wherever you're fishing, and just throw in a hook and just do that constantly. But that's not going to yield the best results. So imagine this fisher person, I think that's the correct term now, a fisher. Let's say that they go home, and when they're home, they're tying different kind of lures. They're tying different kind of flies. They're researching what is the best reel, what is the best net. And then they're studying, water patterns. Where are the water patterns the best at this time of the year, this seasonality? Do you see that this fisher, and again, I think that's the right word, but I'll just use that, is constantly working. They're always working. They are always fishing. But if you equate having the bait in the water is the only time you're fishing, you aren't understanding the whole process of this profession. So I'm going to say the same thing with trading. If you think that trading is when you have your capital in the market, you are missing the whole profession. That is the least time-consuming part. That's actually like 1 to 2% of what being a trader actually is. The rest of the time is to be constantly thinking about these situations, constantly back testing, constantly thinking of new strategies, new indicators to use. That is trading. So you can spend as much time as you want on that, And that brings out beautiful results. And we talked about working harder, trading harder. That's when and how you can trade harder. But if you think that you can just throw in the hook into the water more times and be successful, you don't get it.
It's not mermaid, Father. It's merman. That's a really great analogy now that you've expanded on it, because really, yeah, it's an all-day thing. If you're sitting there improving your system, testing indicators, looking up new ways to do things, just learning more about the game itself. I do this with investing because I'm not an investor by trade. I had to get good at it. I had to become one of the most informed people out there so I could explain it to other people. You're always doing something. You're always taking some type of action, whether or not it's in front of the screen entering orders or closing out trades. Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. You're still working. You're still being productive. You're still getting better. And you're getting closer and closer and closer to your goal. It doesn't always just involve the actual act of trading. So I think that's a perfect way to look at it. Look at the whole thing and not just that one little part.
Let's go ahead and cover really what we talked about is that when you are in this situation where you have said, hey, I'm not going to take action, and you start to feel discomfort, and this is where being self-aware comes in. Hey, I'm feeling some discomfort of inaction, and I want to relieve that discomfort with taking action. I want to make a trade even though I know I shouldn't. I want to change the stop even though I know I shouldn't. I want to take action to relieve this pressure. What do you do when you're feeling that pressure? Well, the first thing you need to do, as much as you possibly can, is to predetermine the possible future situations where taking no action is best. This is called future pacing. And you can use this as a sales tactic where you actually, if you're a salesperson, you'll actually tell the person what it is they're going to do in the future. You're going to say stuff like, hey, you're not going to buy this today. I understand that, but you're definitely going to be back here in a week buying this from me once you go home and do the research. That's called future pacing. That's you telling the person what to do. You need to do this with yourself. You need to be like, hey, in these situations, these are the situations you shouldn't trade. So you should already be watchful and wary for these situations. And you should have rules built around those. If you start to feel that pressure, how can you release the pressure without blowing it by taking action? Well, here's just a few ideas. Demo trade. This is a great method, especially for people in the beginning, to release that pressure. To release the pressure, and they say, okay, look, I really want to act here. I think it's the best thing to do here. So I'm going to leave my real account doing what I planned on it doing, and then I'm going to demo trade my stupid idea to see how it works. Look, I know it's just brain semantics. Who cares what happens in a demo account? But that is going to release a little bit of the pressure. And especially if you do this in the guise of, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this 20 times. I'm going to stay with my system over here with real money, but I'm going to demo trade my crazy ideas over the next 20 times, and then I'm going to compare the results of my demo account to my real account to see if I want to make a change. These are all just lies that you're telling yourself, but you see that with that lie that you just told yourself, your brain can shift. It can be like, oh, okay, this is now an A/B test. I'm doing something. I'm going to A/B test it to see if me blowing my rules early are actually beneficial to me. You've just taken the pressure off. Look, I know it's a lie to yourself. It's okay to lie to yourself if it gives you the results you want. Patrick, what do you think about that?
I don't even think it's a lie. I think it's actually true because that is part of the overall game. Let's take it back to a goalie in soccer. Maybe you're on a really good team and the opposition barely gets any shots on goal. So you're mostly getting paid millions of dollars to stand there. And maybe people might become critical of that. And maybe you feel like you're not really doing your job because you're not contributing to the team. But what people don't know is all of the stuff that happened that week leading up to the actual match itself. There's a lot of mind-numbingly tough work that people don't want to do that leads up to that moment, that gets you ready for those moments where it is time to pull the trigger. And so, like I said, I think you nailed it so good 5 minutes ago, Rob. If you just take a more holistic view of that and understand that trading is a lot of things, not just actually trading, then I think it's going to make a lot more sense, and it's really going to calm you down during those inactive moments.
I'm really glad you brought that back around, because I was envisioning all the hate that you were going to get from goalies when you said, yeah, they just sit around and do nothing. I thought, uh-oh, this could be potentially dangerous.
Yeah, the really good ones kind of do on certain days, but a real soccer fan understands that's part of it. Sometimes you do a lot, sometimes you do a little. That's just what it is.
I know the pro goalies are constantly studying penalty kicks. They know the numbers. They know that, okay, when Messi gets up, he goes to the left bottom corner 27% of the time. He goes here 12% of the time. Like, they know this stuff. So, look, no hate to goalies. We know you guys are awesome. I'm just kidding. All right, so that's one of my ideas I have to take the pressure off by saying I'm going to demo trade my dumb ideas and keep my system intact over here, and then I can compare them. The other thing I want to bring up is removing the ability to act. And this is something that I had to do in my life. And I've told a lot of my stories of when I was a younger trader. Overtrading was a big problem for me. Impulsive trading was a big problem for me. And so I couldn't get over it by discipline. I just couldn't manage it by discipline. So I had to put roadblocks in my way, so I literally couldn't take action. So if you are in a situation where you're feeling like you want to release that pressure by taking action, well, the best thing you can do is remove all the stimulus around you and remove the ability. So look, if you don't ever look at a quote, so let's say you get into a trade, you get into pound yen, you've got your stop, you've got your target, and it's just driving you crazy to sit here and watch it, get rid of it. Get rid of the stimulus. I have traders all the time that will delete their trading apps. They'll just delete their trading apps off their computer and off their phones, to where they literally can't. Now look, I know you can always download them back. So yes, there's going to be some ways for you to screw it up. But what they do is they basically remove the stimulus. If you remove the stimulus, you literally can't have those feelings anymore, because you don't even know what's happening. So Patrick, have you ever had anyone do that?
I'm pretty sure I have, because I told him to, and that's where I was going to kind of chip in here. This is something that I should have made a dedicated video or podcast episode on back in the day, but it was just one of the points I made in a separate video. And I told everybody, because I know, because especially as men, we all think this, that as soon as we start becoming a trader, we're going to kind of have that trader lifestyle, to where we got the app on our phone and we're always checking our trades and stuff like that. I'm like, guys, that is the dumbest thing you can possibly do. If you have any trading platform apps on your phone, get rid of them now. And I guarantee, as soon as I said that, 99% of people out there were like, what? Why? I'm a trader. I need to have this app on my phone. I'm like, no, you don't. Maybe in absolute emergencies, but kind of like you said, Rob, in that case, you can just go ahead and download it again. But it is not doing you any favors to sit there and look at it, especially if you are a daily chart trader like we are at No Nonsense Forex. You only need to trade for 15 minutes a day. You only need to be there for 15 minutes a day. If it's not in that 15-minute window, what the hell are you doing looking at your trades? What net benefit are you trying to gain? Spoiler alert, there isn't one. So take that shit off your phone. And I'm so glad you mentioned this too, Rob, because there's probably a lot of people listening to this podcast right now that may not have been with me back then, or may not have saw that video, or may not have caught what I said. But let me reiterate it again. Take all trading, unless you trade on your phone and you don't have a laptop. That's the only exception I'll make here. Get those apps off your phone to prevent you from ever looking at it when you shouldn't be looking at it, because we all know what that can lead to.
And you can download that app years later when you are a rock solid trader that has no hint of breaking your rules. Then it's okay. But I agree with you, Patrick. At first, it's really going to hurt you. All right, one of the things I had to do, and I've told this story many times, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time telling you, but I would give my wife the security card I needed to log into my account. Anytime I wanted to log into my account to make a trade, I needed to put in security codes. So I gave it to her, and then I literally couldn't log into my account and change an order. I couldn't delete an order. I couldn't do anything. And so I basically made it to where I couldn't take action. And okay, I will tell more of the story. The first time I talked her into giving it back to me, and then I blew it. So I told her, whatever I say, I'm going to be very convincing. I'm going to be very good. Do not give it back to me. And she didn't. And I tried like one or two other times, and she didn't. And then you know what? I quit. I quit trying to get it back from her because I knew I wouldn't. And you know what happened? I started to like let go and just realize, oh, the trade's going to do what it's going to do. And I was no longer thinking about it. And I knew that there's nothing I could do to take action to change it. And I was able to follow systems much easier. So if you don't have a security card on your account, then you could do something like change passwords. So we talked about accountability in the last podcast. If you have an accountability partner, this is a great way to use them. Hey, I need you to go in, change my password, and then don't give it back to me until next Tuesday, or give it back to me next Thursday, or you figure out some time for them to tell you what the new password is. So these are all ways for you to basically make it to where you cannot take action. And the last one I want to talk about is automation. Automation. If you use automation, and again, automation is this catch-all term for program trading. Theoretically speaking, a basic stop order is automation. When I started trading, we didn't have them. You had to have a mental stop. You actually had to be there and click it when it broke through the point you wanted it to. This is automation. So use the automation as much as you possibly can, and that way you already know that you've already predetermined the action. When you know you've already predetermined the action, it does take a little bit of the pressure off of you to like relieve that, because you already know, hey, it's taken care of. Like in the Flat Earth Trading Society, we had a 2x ATR. There was no pressure. There was no worry. There was no anything. I knew that ATR, that 2x trailing stop ATR would take care of itself, and I didn't have to really worry about it. So again, remove your ability to act, change passwords, delete trading apps, automation. These are all ways for you to help yourself in the situations where doing nothing is the right thing. It helps you actually follow your plan.
And people who have been with us since the very beginning of this podcast, I'm going to say it one more time. A lot of these topics and a lot of these anecdotes you have probably heard before, but this is not without thought when we do this. You know, we knew from before that the FOMO episode, the boredom episode, the extrovert episode got some really good feedback, and it wouldn't have gotten that feedback had it not applied to a lot of you, and it had not touched you probably in some way. And so it is worth expanding on these topics, and we hope you got a lot out of this. And on that note, that will do it for this episode of the Trading Psychology Podcast. Rob and I will both see you next time.
Goodbye, everybody.